You're listening to the Rise Above podcast, the only podcast on the planet with a mission to help you live a free and uncommon life. Here's your host, Greg Smith.
Yes. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. You are listening to the Rise Above podcast, and this is episode number 5. And I'm so glad that you decided to join me again today. I'm your host, Greg Smith, and I believe if you desire uncommon freedom in business and in life, it starts with creating a champion's mindset from within. So today, I have a very quick question for you, and that's this. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to retire early? Have you ever thought about the irony of working until you're 67 years old to finally live a life of retirement? Well, for me, I come from a very small industrious town. My mother worked for the same company for over 30 years. My father has worked for the same company for over 30 years. My wife, both of her parents have worked. They're retired now, but they worked for the same company. One of them for 40 years, the other one for 44 years. And so I found myself having the same goal of finding a good company that out of school would hire me, that would pay me well, that would have good benefits and 401k. So I could start saving for retirement. And I found myself 22 years old, and I had somebody ask me a question that was really similar to the two questions that I asked you in the beginning. And I realized at that moment that as much as I felt like the person punched me in the gut, I admired him for asking me that question, because I really thought that I had the world, by the balls. I really did. I was 22. I made $45,000 a year. I didn't go to college. I had great health insurance. I mean, the best health insurance, frankly, that I've heard of at that time. And I had matching 401k and some other really good benefits as well. And I thought, being 22, I didn't really know how the world worked back then, but I thought, man, I'm going to work for 30 years. I thought you just had to work for 30 years and then you could retire from wherever it was that you worked for. And so, here I was thinking, I've made it. I have a great job, matching 401k. I'm socking away money. I'm being diligent. I'm doing some smart things. I mean, I made some poor decisions and acquired some debt that I shouldn't have at that point, but who hasn't? And, I really thought that I was going to be 52 years old and have the ability to retire and live this life of freedom. And I didn't even know what the heck I was going to do when I was 52. I don't play golf, didn't really have a plan. I just knew that, it was kind of like school, right? Like I was kind of looking at the end date, like when does summer start? And summer started for me when I was 52, or so I thought. And then come to find out, you got to be 67 years old to tap into your money where it's not taxed, where it's not penalized for pulling it out early. And it was around that same time that the economy in 2007, 2008 started to go through the tank. And I remember watching my mother, who was very diligent. She put away money. She was smart with her money, put away money in a 401k. At least, she did everything right. Everything, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes again, everything right. And what had happened in 2008 was a tragedy. There were literally people all across the world lost money in the market. I mean, people just and we don't even know where, the money went somewhere. Because here's the deal, the way the stock market works, by the way, is when you lose money, somebody else wins money. And when you win money, I call it win money because, you're not really doing anything for this money. You're just putting it somewhere that gives you a return. So you're not really providing value for anybody. You're just kind of putting it somewhere and hoping it gives a return. So when you win money, somebody else loses money. And when somebody else loses money, or when you lose money, somebody else wins money. And so in 2008, a lot of people, lost a lot of money. And my mom was one of those. And it was during this same time, I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. People saw their portfolios go down by, 40%. So you can imagine if you had $1 million in your 401k at this point, you watched it go from $1 million down to $600,000. Okay. And yeah, you may still be positive for what you put into it, but if you're in your retirement years or you're getting close to it and you just lost almost half of your portfolio, that's not a good thing. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because I really do believe that 401k's, are not the best vehicle to start a quote unquote retirement fund. And I really want to encourage you to start living retired today. I want to show you how you can start living retired now, how you can start enjoying life now, so you don't have to wait until you're 67, because we don't know if 67 is going to come. Dear God, I hope it does. Cross my heart. Hope not to die. I hope that I make it to, 95, 100, but we don't know. And I don't want to wait till then. And I don't want to slave away 50 years of my life, or however many years it is, to get to 67 just so I can tap into my retirement. Because, I really don't know that many people that, and I've asked this a lot, I don't really know that many people that are living off of a retirement income. There's some good state pensions, and I know some teachers and some government workers who have great pensions. But even then, they're usually not making enough money to truly experience life the way that they want to experience life. And so my point to telling you, my mother's story is, it was literally about a year later that she had a forced retirement from her company. And so she had this decision to make. Now, fortunately, it was about 2 years before that. My parents had made a great investment with a cash flow producing asset, which we'll talk about. And so my mother took the severance package and she started living in early retirement. And I can tell you that she absolutely loves life. She volunteers. She's out and about. My mom's a people person, and she's really living the life that I believe she probably wanted to live 10 or 20 years prior to that, but just didn't know how. And she was forced into it. But there's many, many people that are forced into that same situation that don't have the cash flow to be able to get them through. And so they're forced to roll their 401k into the next company and therefore get another job. And it's just this ongoing process of just working until we're retired. And so I want you really to start living like you're retired much sooner. Because for me, as I was working in my job and I was, a young man, when that question was asked to me, I really thought about it. I was like, man, I really don't want to do this job until I'm 67. And most people, the average person sticks with a job for 3.6 years. So, as we're switching from one company to the next, and we're just rolling money, in the end, if you really look at all these fees and different things, you're losing money. You'll end up losing money through all this whole process. And so for me, I ended up starting my own business. I created a cash flow producing asset, and I've been able to live like I'm retired since the last decade. And today we're going to talk about that and get a little bit in depth here. And so the question becomes, how much does it really take to live free? How much? And this is what I call the freedom number. How much money does it really take to start living free and retired today? True freedom comes when your passive income, money that is coming to you, rather if you're working or not, your passive income, your residual income, and that was a foreign concept to me many moons ago. And so residual income is money that comes in through your investments or through a business, through a cash flow producing asset, money that continues to come in every month, no matter what you do. It's when that number is higher than your expenses. And so what the story goes, the story that I was told for many years and grew up, looking to achieve was, if I could sock away, a couple $1 million in my 401k, then I would have this cash flow that comes to me when I'm 67 or above. And so you think about this. I mean, the irony of this is, what do you want to live on when you're 67? Theoretically, you've paid your debts off by then. You've paid your house off. You're not driving fancy cars, but I don't want to live small. You can't shrink your way to wealth. You can't shrink your way to having great experiences. You need money to be able to live, and experience things and take your kids to Disney like we are, or going to Rome, this fall. Like, you have to have money to be able to do those things. And so hear me clear. This isn't about, quote unquote money. It's about what money can do for you. And so let's say, you want to live off of a $40,000 a year income, which, I don't when I'm 67. But if you're getting a modest, just like a real safe return of 4% on your mill, that's $40,000 per year. So you have to have $1 million tied up in an account, $1 million that you worked your hump off for years. You have to have that $1 million sitting away in a 401k or some other, vehicle that you can never tap into. Because by the way, when you take that money out, right? If you take part of that $1 million out, well, now your residual that you're earning off of retirement, because that's what retirement is, guys. Retirement for you and me, that we've been told, retirement is creating a cash flow producing asset. That asset just happens to be a lot of money that's tied up into stocks in the market and some other different things. And so, and by the way, I'm not saying all 401k's are bad and you should never fund them. But what I am saying is there are other things that I believe that you should do first. Because to tie $1 million into one investment like that, and you may be diversified inside your portfolio, but here's the thing. Let's say you're 67, you sock away a couple million. This is the scary thing. Rule number 1 is never lose principal on your investment. That's how you get wealth, is you don't lose your principal. And so any vehicle where you could theoretically lose your principal, or like my mother, let's say that she was 67 years old, she's getting ready to retire. 2008, is her year of retirement. And all of a sudden, she goes from $1 million to $600,000 overnight because the economy crashes. Now, some people would say, well, the stock market over time plays out. Okay, well, somebody who's 67 doesn't have time to let it play out. So don't fool yourself.
Are you someone who wants to live life on your own terms? Do you dream of having more time to spend doing the things you love? Then download your copy of The Freedom Formula absolutely free at www.riseabovepodcast.com. What are you waiting for? Go to www.riseabovepodcast.com to get your free copy of The Freedom Formula.
That was the aha moment for me when I realized that you could have all this money tied up, number one, and you could lose a big majority of it overnight in the exact moment that you need it most and that you were counting on it. And that's the age of retirement. The second part to that is, if I sock that money away and now I'm in retirement, I'm living off of the interest, that means I can never touch the principal if I still want to have the interest. That to me just doesn't make sense, because then there's always this money sitting there that I never got to tap into. Now, the cool thing about that is my heirs will get to tap into that money, hopefully in a very smart fashion. If I were to do that, which I'm not, I have, a different theory here that goes against the grain, but I don't want to, and I didn't after I learned this, is I quit funding 401k. I took my money back. I took the 10% penalty and I started investing into other things. I started to invest in other things. And so the very first thing you have to ask yourself is really, what is your freedom number? What is your freedom number? So this is about starting to live like you're retired now. I know from the thousands of people I've talked to over the past 10, 11 years of being an entrepreneur and helping people get life on their terms and live a life of uncommon freedom, people want that. And you probably do too, especially if you're listening to this podcast, and you can have it. But we have to have a plan. And so the plan starts with knowing, what is our freedom number? I know for me, I'll tell you this. I know for me, when I took the uncommon leap to become an entrepreneur and stick my my job to the side. And I did this because I wanted to live a life of freedom. When I took that leap, my wife and I said to each other, we promised each other that it was okay as long as we could pay our bills, but we had more time together. That's what mattered. That is what matters in life, is having time to spend with the people that you love and cherish the most. I've told you on a couple of my other episodes that deep and loving relationships are what matter to me. And I'd venture to say it's probably what matters to you too. What is life without deep and loving relationships? And so I want to be able to have the time to spend with those people now as opposed to later. And so we promised ourselves, as long as we had money to pay the bills, as long as that was taken care of, and we had more time to spend together, then it was totally worth it. And that started with knowing what our freedom number was. And our freedom number comes down to what are our expenses. And so if you're an employee right now, and maybe you plan to be an employee forever, that's totally cool. But I'm going to tell you how to start living just a little bit more free today. And that is, we have to decrease the monthly outflow. Listen carefully. Decrease the monthly outflow, all while increasing the monthly inflow. So increase the inflow, decrease the outflow. Now, somebody like Dave Ramsey does a great job when somebody's not financially aware at all and talking about a budget. And budgets can be great. However, I believe that a budget, to an extent, when you're literally counting pennies, you can get in a scarcity mindset. And a scarcity mindset never made anybody wealthy. A scarcity mindset never made somebody truly free. I believe the monthly inflow is one of the number one things that you can impact. And so what we have to do is figure out what are some of the bad debts that we can pay off that will increase. Because here's the thing. An example, I recently paid off my 2008 Toyota Tundra. This is 2018. So whenever you're listening to this, just know it's a 10-year-old vehicle, but it's awesome. It's in great shape. I love it. It is my man truck. But it was a $518 car payment every month. And so I targeted it and I paid it off. And by paying it off, I increased my monthly cash flow by $518. And so one thing that you could do, in my opinion, is stop funding your 401k and start targeting off debt that you have now, because that will increase your monthly cash flow. And when you can increase your monthly cash flow and at the same time you're decreasing the required outflow, your bills, right? So if I pay off my truck, now I don't have the $518 car payment going out, and I now can keep the extra $518, right? That means I now have more inflow and less outflow. That's a win-win formula. Whereas if I'm always funding my 401k and throwing money over there before I pay off my debts, this just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. You should always pay off your debts first, because when you pay off your debts, there's something psychologically that happens, but it also makes you a free man or a free woman, depending on who you are today. And when you're a free person, you're not so worried about your job or getting fired or all these other different things or these outside sources that you cannot control. You can't control them. But what can you control? You can control your own finances. You can control your inflow and you can control your outflow. And so, yes, we want to reduce debt, but at the same time, we want to increase our cash flow. So if I know, my freedom number is X, $4,000 a month, that's mortgages, insurance, car payments, whatever it is, student loans, then I know if I can start to loosen that up, or what I like to do, and what really helped me was I increased my cash flow every month by that much. And I did that by creating a cash flow producing business. Now, there's many ways you can get more cash flow every single month. You can do that through acquiring certain assets, say real estate, where you have rentals and people are paying you every single month. Those are acquired through financial equity, right? You have to have money. Typically nowadays, you have to have money to put down on those houses or just straight buy them with cash. The days of, multiple $0 loans out there in the real estate market are fairly gone, and you can thank the financial crisis of 2008 for that. Or you can create a cash flow producing business, which there's many businesses out there. Like I'm going to talk about next week, the best business in the world for the average person who's looking to get their foot in the game as being an entrepreneur, where you can put sweat equity into it. And through sweat equity, you can build a business and acquire an asset that pays you every single month. Okay. But the key is start acquiring that asset today. Start acquiring that asset today, whatever that might be. It might be a business, it might be real estate, but it has to be something that is consumable. Okay. Consumable and residual. And so rent is every single month. So rentals, and we have property, but that's not my number one thing. But it's somewhere that I put my freedom money that I have now, because I got to put it somewhere. And so money that comes in through somebody paying their rent, that comes in every month, that's a cash flow. When you have a business where somebody consumes a product, well, they're going to continue to consume that product. Say groceries, as an example. People buy groceries every single week. That's a consumable product, right? So you could find something ultimately to sell that's a consumable product. But let's get back and let's really summarize this to give you an action plan. So here's the thing. If you're looking to really start living life more free right now, the formula comes with reducing what your outflow is while increasing what your inflow is. Okay? That's how you start to crawl out of the hole. Now, you may already have some debts paid off, and that's awesome. And if so, then what we do is we start creating more inflow through a residual cash flow producing asset. And we'll talk about some of those next week, but you start producing that cash flow to where you're making more money on your side gig outside of your 9 to 5, or if you're like me as a 6 to 6, third shift kind of thing. You're making more money on the side than you are at your regular job. So now you are truly free because your bills are being covered by some other thing than your job. Because if you're always making money based upon your time, then you can never truly become wealthy because there's only so many hours in the day. Profits are better than wages. Profits are better than wages, and that's why having a business and being an entrepreneur. We're in 2018. We're in one of the most amazing times in the human race with the internet. Generations to come will look back at us and say, that was the first generation that had the internet. Can you believe it? That was the first generation to get cars. Thinking back to the early 1900s, the first generation with airplanes. We have an amazing ability now to where you can turn a passion into profit, and you can start a cash flow producing business on the side of what you're already doing. But you got to have a goal. And here's the thing. There's ways that you can start today, even before you start that business or even before you start doing a little side hustle and turning a passion into profit. I would encourage you to relook at a 401k and really look at the pros and cons of what that system is. There's other things out there. If you really want to know what they are, you can email me or direct message me on Facebook, which you'll find me, or Instagram, wherever else, or hit me up on the website. But there's other things out there where you don't have to tie your money up and you can start living like you're retired today. And so decrease the outflow, increase the inflow. That's what I want to encourage you today. Start looking at your finances. Don't shrink your way to wealth, but start looking at how can you provide more value and what can you do to start earning a profit instead of just a wage on the side. And next week, I have a treat for you because we're going to dive in. I'm going to talk about one of the best opportunities for the average person to get in the game and start making momentum money today. And so if you're interested in that, make sure you tune in next week. Until next time, take care. God bless.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.